Hi, everyone. I'm Blaine Birch, your host for the Turning Point podcast, stories and strategies from the world of business. And joining us today is Mark Benning. And I've known Mark Benning for quite a while now. Mark has a really storied career, both as an entrepreneur and on the investment side. And so I'm really excited to have you on today, Mark. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks, Blaine, for having me. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too. And so before we, kind of get into kind of what's going on today, I wanted to kind of reach back into your past and where you started as an entrepreneur, something that sort of stood out. How did you get going in the world of business?
Well, I was actually playing professional hockey in Germany post-college, and a friend of mine called me up. He was working with a private equity firm in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and was leaving the firm to go off to business school and said, "Hey, they're looking for a replacement. Would you consider it?" And so I said, sure. They flew me out, interviewed me, and hired me for the job. And that's sort of how I got my start in the sort of business side of things. And started with the private equity firm where we were acquiring businesses in the Midwest.
Okay, great. And so, interesting. So your first taste of business was actually probably fairly steps up, right? Right into private equity and something that a lot of times is more you expect more of a seasoned sort of business person to be involved in, which I know you did a lot more of later. How did you, or when did you start your first business?
So after that experience, I decided I wanted to get more in the startup world. So I went to business school at Stanford, and that was a great environment for learning about startups, learning how they operate, how they grow, how they raise money. And at the end of that 2-year period, I wanted to start a company and connected with a classmate, and he and I started a software company.
And what was that? What was the name of this company?
Name of the company was Release Software.
Okay.
And this was a time of the early internet when software companies were worried about downloadable software eating into their margins and sort of the ability of people to copy and widely distribute their software. So we created a security mechanism that wrapped around the software and prevented it from being used past a free trial period.
Okay. And how did that experience go? Were you in that business for a long time, short period?
I was in the business for about 4 years. I started it with the classmates, and then convinced a couple other classmates to join the company, and it went well. And then we had sort of a falling out amongst the management team. Brought in a new CEO, and she really shook things up, and I ended up leaving the company at that point.
Okay. Now, this is right in the right in the heart of Silicon Valley. What was the environment like back then compared to what it is now? Was it already kind of Silicon Valley and all of this networking and or was that to sort of come later?
I think a lot of that came later. This was still relatively early stages. So software was, I would say the chip industry was the first industry that really evolved in Silicon Valley. And then software came next. And it hadn't really reached the explosive phase it did with the internet era.
Okay.
So it was still, a select group of investors, of entrepreneurs, of companies that were starting up.
Yeah. Yeah. So from there, so you left your first sort of software company, your first taste of business. Where did you go from there? What was your next endeavor?
Well, I took about a year off and worked at a couple venture capital companies, really to learn how investors looked at deals and how they evaluated startups and made decisions to invest in them. And with that experience, convinced another business school classmate to join me with a new idea I had to start a company that was an internet company at the time.
Okay, and so that was so this is around the time when things were starting to get going on online, and so this is probably just sort of the beginning fire in Silicon Valley. I'm guessing then. Hey.
Yeah, so this was really the time of the internet bubble. We, for that company, raised about $50 million over a course of 3 years, ramped the company up to about 150 people, and we're literally spending money as fast as we can, with our investors telling us to spend even faster.
I've heard that story quite a few times. So, but you know, I always hear it from a lot of times from a kind of an outside perspective. What can you dive into a little bit? Like what sort of pressures and competing ideals did you sort of feel when you're getting that pressure to spend, spend, spend?
Well, it was hard. Their motivation was for us to get more customers, more eyeballs. That was big at the time, and it felt like we were spending money. Like we bought a sign at the San Francisco Giants baseball stadium for our company, and we had just launched the company. So it was a little early to be advertising in a venue like that.
Yeah.
But it was something that the investors really pushed hard for us to get out and market and advertise ourselves more. And for me, it felt a little bit early, and it felt a little bit like we were spending too much too quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I had that experience kind of, I don't know, it was early in my career with my last business. We sponsored a major event, the Fringe Festival here in Edmonton. I'm sure you've kind of heard of it anyway. Mark probably have.
Yep.
And I can't remember how many people they get over the weeks, like 1 million people or something like that. And we had the center spread of their guidebook, and we did it. We promoted one of our pieces of software in it, and we thought this is just going to skyrocket sales off of this and everything. And it was one of the most useful lessons I had, because we had all of this exposure with the wrong software to the wrong crowd, and we didn't even see a bump in our sales. And our sales were solid with that software, but virtually nothing happened from that. And it was such a lesson of you can spend, it doesn't matter, you can spend an unlimited amount of money and not have anything actually happen, or anything good happen, if you don't have that that product market fit and the right crowd, the right timing, the right message. It was a hard lesson for us, but a really useful one that I remember, like it's always top of mind today. And that was probably 15 years ago or something like that. So, so you, what ended up happening with that company? Did you have some success in the end? I know that was a bit of a trickier start, I guess.
Yeah, we ended up, what happened with the company is, so 9/11 hit, and then the NASDAQ crashed a few months later. And by that time, the investors had control of the board of the company. And so we still had about 15 million left in cash, 1.5, and that would have been enough to carry us through those dark days. But the investors looked around the table and said, "Look, why don't we shut the company down and then pay back the excess money to the investors, and we'll call it a win for the day." And we tried to fight it, but in the end, we didn't have control of the board, and so we ended up losing that battle. And that's what happened. We ended up shutting the company down, giving the
Yeah.
money back to the investors, which for that period of time they considered a win, even getting a fraction of their money back from that company.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a story we hear a lot here with Dryrun, because of course we're dealing with companies that are managing their cash flow, of course. And so one of the things we know is how many companies go under that are actually profitable. Or right now, right now, for you guys that are listening, we're in August. We're still like kind of mid-COVID. Businesses are really struggling, and it's the same sort of thing. Businesses are making decisions and how to survive another day and how they can make it through. And sometimes businesses that should be surviving for a number of reasons just aren't right now. And it's a bit of a tragedy, actually, to see businesses that are successful and should make it through just not making it. So it's funny how history sort of repeats itself. I know Dryrun comes from 2009. My experience in 2009, it's like every 10 or 15 years, it's another one of these that come up and unfortunately kill off a bunch of businesses, and too often they're smaller businesses and startups and ones that are may be able to make an impact and change the world, and they never get the chance. So. So you've had some companies, you've built them on investment. I think it sounds like you've learned some really useful but hard lessons, and the ones that many of us as entrepreneurs have heard about, the double-edged sword sometimes with investment, where it can really help build a business and carry it forward, and it can also lose control of the business and take it away. Where did you go from there in your career?
So my next company I started was a marketing services firm, and we were working with Google and Yahoo to buy keywords and traffic from them, and sent them the users to about 100 websites we owned that were all in the financial services area. So we were doing lead generation for banks, for credit card companies, loan companies, things like that.
How did you
And
get into
the
that? Like, how did you come up with that idea, or what sort of led you to that kind of service?
Yeah, so I was actually working as a consultant for a number of small companies, and started getting more and more demand for this kind of service, and realized, I could turn this into a business. So it's one of those examples when, if you keep active in an industry and get involved, you'll find areas where you can sort of take advantage of an opportunity and turn it into an actual startup business itself.
Yeah. So how did you fund that one? Did you raise money again, or did you just bootstrap that one?
We talked to a number of investors, and they considered it too service oriented for their sort of investment focus. So we ended up funding it on our own credit cards. Each of us had I had two partners in the firm, and each of us had about $100,000 of credit on our credit cards that we individually used to buy the traffic from Google and Yahoo. And I think at one point we might have had like 900,000 of credit card debt that we were paying off every month because our customers loved the service we were providing.
Yeah.
And so after talking to a number of investors who passed on us, we just sort of hunkered down and bootstrapped it, funded it ourselves, and got to a point within probably 4 to 6 months where we were profitable and actually didn't need outside money to fund our growth.
Yeah. So that's uh, it's such a flip side story, and how so many businesses are built, and I know sort of the Silicon Valley stories are all investment, 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 but especially service companies, like that's where I came from my last company, and that was all bootstrapped, and it's such a different model. I know when I started my last company, we were basically profitable out of the gate because we landed a contract, and then started to put the business together to serve it and to start building from there. And it's just such a different mentality than the proverbial, jump off the cliff and build the airplane on the way down kind of approach.
Mhm.
So no, so that business was really quite successful for you, wasn't it? Like, how long did it take you to really build that up, and where did you get to with that business?
Well, I was with the business for about 4 years, and over that period of time, we grew it into nearly 35 million of revenue. Those are U.S. dollars as well, so nearly 50 million Canadian revenue, and it was very profitable. So we were paying ourselves large salaries, paying out dividends and things like that. We had a very small number of employees. So we reached that size with only 15 employees.
Oh, wow.
And so we had some really smart Stanford programmers that worked with us in the company, and we automated the heck out of everything. So anything that we could create a software program to automate, rather than have someone look at it, look at the data and analyze it, we did. And so that grew the company relatively quickly over that period of time, and quite profitably as well.
Yeah, so that's wow, such an amazing success story. That's what a lot of people dream of automating small staff and high profit. And it's funny because that's how I would sort of classify a unicorn in some ways in business versus I guess what the investors sometimes say is a unicorn of these billion-dollar businesses. So you were there for about 4 years, and then you went back into the investment side. I take it. Is that where you went
Yep.
next? Or
Yep. So I had been angel investing here and there over that period of time. And I decided I wanted to get more directly into the investment side of the business. So that's what we ended up doing.
so was your, I guess, investment philosophy, how was it different, or was it different than just from your experiences early on with the investments in your early company? Were they, did you take a different approach? Do you have a different, or was it really you learned a lot from that and you kind of went down the same path? Like, what was your investment philosophy, I guess, when you jumped into that?
Yeah, having been an entrepreneur and been on that side of the table, I think I come to investing from a much more entrepreneur friendly perspective. A lot of venture capitalists come into investing more from a financial analysis side of things. So they worked at an investment bank like Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley for a few years. They went to business school. They joined a venture firm as an associate and worked their way up to partner. Where I came at it more from having experience as an entrepreneur and having done it and having raised money from a range of different venture capitalists. So I saw a lot of different styles. And where I really resonated is with the style that was on the side of the entrepreneur, was a supporter to the entrepreneur, helping the entrepreneur in any way I could, not trying to run the company for them or not trying to tell them what to do, but really to be a resource for them. And that worked in some cases, other cases not so well. But I think overall that's much more my style as an investor,
Mhm.
is to do it that way.
Well, and it feels like that is the kind of a growing trend, is less about just sort of get on the runaway train, and a little bit more of working almost as partners in a, um, as investors, and being there to help. And that's, we hear that all the time, because of course we talk with investors quite frequently, and they're ringing us up once a week, and and we get to chat with them, and you learn a lot from those conversations. And it feels like that's a lot of the conversations that we have. And I don't know if it's just because of the space we're in, or if maybe there's a little bit of a culture shift over the last few years, in that space. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there is a bit of a culture shift. I mean, I think two things are happening that drive that. One is the rise and the prominence of entrepreneurship. So many places around the world now are realizing that is a great way to grow jobs, to grow the economy, to improve the prospects of a country or an
Yeah.
area. And so I think the importance of entrepreneurship has really gone up over the years. So investors are realizing that the ones with the real power are not themselves with the money. It's the entrepreneur with the ideas, the drive, the ambition to make something and create something new, and
Yeah.
and to realize that. And I think the other thing is investors know there's a ton of cash out there for different types of investments. And the scarce resource is not capital. The scarce resource is being able to help the entrepreneur, make it easier for them to grow, show them techniques from their experience that work, and help them realize their goals and achieve success quicker than their competitors out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and I agree with you. Like, we're so focused on kind of the small and medium sized businesses in our business, and we're a small business, I suppose, ourselves. And as a startup entrepreneur, and talking with entrepreneurs, every other day or every day here. Um, I believe the same thing. I think entrepreneurs are the ones that can, one at a time, lift the economy back up and build business and create jobs. On the flip side, I find there's investment in businesses. There isn't a lot of support for entrepreneurs. There's support in the advice area. There's not a lot of support in the just to basically survive area, and we echo it right now with the different payroll relief programs that we see in Canada, the United States, across the world. And we know the entrepreneur is basically tends to be kind of like, that doesn't count. The entrepreneur never gets any help. It's always for the staff, right? We see that over and over again. There's a real push in the entrepreneur to lift the economy back up and push forward, as long as they're ready to chop off an arm or two. And it's a tough road. And right now it's difficult as we see entrepreneurs struggle and businesses fail, to see that, because I know how much energy and risk and sleepless nights they've put in. So it's nice to see this culture shift where investors are starting to take more note of that and understand that, the entrepreneur has to be successful, because it's not going to happen without that person driving the business forward and sometimes bleeding out, I suppose. So.
No, absolutely. And it's a great point. And, investors are nothing without the entrepreneur making that business a success. I mean, what investors are providing are the capital, some resources, some advice, but in the end of the day, it's the entrepreneur that's the real hero of the story.
Yeah. It's an interesting time, I think there's going to be a big shakeup. We know from what I've been reading, we've already lost over 20% of the businesses, small businesses here, and we're only 6 months into this. The projections are somewhere to between 40 to 50% businesses will fail, but that's very much on the small, medium-sized business, and they don't have access to the capital and things. And I'm curious what your thoughts are coming out of this. After a lot of business failures, there's going to be opportunity. Absolutely, there'll be opportunity. There's going to be gaps there. Do you think the small businesses, the entrepreneurs, are going to have that access to capital, or do you think investors will be a little bit scared of it, to be honest?
Looking back historically, some of the best times to be an investor have been these down periods. So if you look at the recession, the Great Recession, there were some great companies that came out of that era. If you look at when the internet bubble burst, and there was this bleak 2 or 3 year period where people were like, the internet's overblown, it's not going to be realized. There were some amazing companies that came out of that era. So
Yeah.
having started a company and failed essentially at it and had to shut it down, there are incredible learning lessons you get from an experience like that. And I think there are going to be some great companies that come out of this time period,
Yeah.
that will be built for the right reasons. They'll be fundamentally strong businesses. They'll be profitable. So I think investors realize that some of the best times to make investments are during these down periods. And, from what I've seen, the data says that investment hasn't really slowed that much from the venture capital side of things. Over the past few months. It's actually picked up recently.
Yeah.
And so I think investors, naturally are greedy, and they want to get in when they can get the best prices. And that may be this era right now that we're going through.
Yeah. Well, and it's encouraging to know that businesses that are growing or showing attraction, they have some ability to really grow, and there will be opportunity. It's going to be a massive opportunity, and unfortunately, it's a consequence of a lot of businesses failing. And as the economy picks up, there's just going to be gaps there that businesses will be able to fill. And I remember reading an article, and you guys don't quote me on this because it's been a while, but it was about Bob Parsons, that was a founder of GoDaddy, and he had those challenges during the sort of the dot bomb, I suppose, with GoDaddy. And I just remember reading in this article that he was down to his last, I don't know, $1 or $2 million or whatever $1 million, and of course, but bleeding money. And he was sitting in a coffee shop and just realized, you know what, if I run out of cash, I can just come work here. And so he stuck with it. And I remember the article talking about it's just, he was positioned right, but he said a lot of it was just he hung on when a lot of his competitors failed. And as the competitors failed, more business came to them and they reinvested it. And, the next thing you know, he's, multi-billionaire with, how many different businesses. But it was such an interesting, it wasn't just this amazing strategy. It was just hang on, and the last person standing to some degree has suddenly opportunity. And, I think we're going to see that. And right now we're seeing some really interesting, tactics that small businesses are using that are changing the way they do business, how they operate, who they target, everything to sustain themselves and see if they can ride through to the other side. So there's a lot of success stories, and of course there's going to be a lot of business. They're already having a lot of businesses failing, but those success stories hopefully are going to get that investment in, but also draw more entrepreneurs back into the economy and help drive this growth as we come out of this recession or whatever it turns out to be, I suppose.
No, it's a great point, and I think one of the key things is survival is critical. So if you're not in the game, if you're not playing the game, if you're not able to survive, I mean, then it's hard to be successful, obviously. I think
Yeah.
the second thing is the notion of incremental improvements and incremental benefits. So it's not the one-off, ad in a baseball stadium that's going to make a company successful. It's
Yeah.
those, week to week incremental improvements, making your customers happy, improving the product, really satisfying the need out there. That's what over time makes a business successful. It's not the one off brand new strategy that's going to do it. It is those incremental improvements that make companies strong and successful.
Yeah.
And I think this is a time where you're going to see more and more of that, and you're going to see some great successes come out of this.
Yeah, it's the small wins, the swatting the mosquitoes. I've heard that sort of term before, and
Yeah.
the small shifts, the small changes until you get traction in the right place and get things moving. And yeah, this has been a really great chat, Mark. But I did want to sort of fast forward a bit to so what are you doing today? Where are you today? And tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. So today I'm running a small investment fund called the Sprout Fund, and I've got three other partners with it, and it's a great team. We really enjoy working together, and more than anything else, we enjoy helping entrepreneurs. So we've started it in Edmonton, Canada, and we invest across Western Canada. We have one investment left in our first fund. So right now we're starting to plan fund two and are just getting that in place. It's going to be a much larger fund. We're targeting somewhere in the range of 25 million or so, and looking to make seed investments again across Western Canada.
Yeah, so that's well, that's terrific to hear because, of course, we're based in Western Canada, and that that's how we know each other, of course. And you may or may not be one of our investors from our early seed round, our pre-seed round. We
Yeah.
were the first investment, I believe, by Sprout Fund, but that's really encouraging news for me because we care about well, I'll be honest with you. We care about entrepreneurs across the world. We have customers in, I think, 70 countries right now. We love small business, and it's a fraternity of entrepreneurs. But this is also, close to home. We love hearing that there's support in Western Canada for businesses. And we hope this mimicked all over the globe where regions are actually supporting startups and supporting businesses. I firmly believe that's incredibly important for every spot in the world, but for Western Canada, that is, very resource based to be able to start driving innovation and start building jobs in a different space is just so critical. So that's really I'm happy to hear that your second fund is coming into form and it's going to give you a lot more room to move and help a lot more businesses.
Yeah, we're excited about it. I think it's true that this area needs to start thinking about the future, and the resource-based economy will only last so long. And technology is such an amazing area of growth, of job creation, of economic improvement. And having smart entrepreneurs in this region be able to access the capital that we're going to have is, I think, going to be really helpful for the area.
Yeah.
The other thing that our new fund will do is let us do follow-on funding for companies that we've previously invested in. So that's another thing. We've got some great companies like Dryrun that we've invested in out of Fund One that we'd love to do follow-on investment in as they grow and develop themselves, and
Yeah.
continue supporting them along the way.
So where can, especially of course, I know this is, people globally here are listening to this podcast, but where can someone, if they're in Western Canada and they want to find out about Sprout Fund, where can they find you?
So Fund One, you can find us at sproutfund.ca. And our new fund, we've got a new domain at sprout.vc, where you can find information more about Fund Two.
Okay, terrific. So we'll be sure to put that in the notes wherever we post this in the various places. So, but yeah, definitely, if you guys are Western Canada, if you're getting, trying to get a business off the ground here, definitely check out sprout.vc. Learn about that next fund. When do you believe that will be available?
We're hoping to launch that by the end of this year. And so we're hoping that we can do a first close and start investing by the end of this year for that fund.
Okay, terrific. So you guys are end of 2020, getting into 21. Make sure you check it out. So, well, this is terrific. I really enjoyed chatting with you, Mark. We've got to talk business a number of times, but really, this is the first time we've really been able to chat about some of your experiences early on, and of course, I find them so interesting when I'm talking with other entrepreneurs. So, thanks so much for joining us. I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope everyone listening here did as well.
Thanks, Blaine. I appreciate it. And good luck in the business as you move forward.
Thanks so much, Mark.
All right. Take care.